Before jerky mechanical polygon men flopped lifelessly through the uncanny valley, games were drawn by hand, with love and care invested into every sprite, every tile. Remember those days? No? Well, Pilgrim, maybe you should join us as we look back at the life and times of 2D graphics and their evolution through the years. 1962, Space War, for PDP-1 by Steve Russell et al. It's only the first video game ever made, approximately. Aside from its pioneering nature, Space War was notable for featuring vector graphics, mathematically plotted lines of light against a black screen. Simple now, yeah, but crazy at the time. 1972 and 1975, Tennis for Odyssey by Magnavox, Pong for Pong console by Atari. Which came first, tennis or Pong? There's a couple of men willing to argue the point to death. Whichever arrived first, the important thing is that it introduced television compatibility to gaming. While the arcade version of Pong used a vector screen, the home machines had to work on standard TVs and thus introduced the pixel-based raster visuals that have become an industry standard. 1982, Moon Patrol for arcade by Irem. Moon Patrol was a great game for a lot of reasons, but it perhaps stands out as the first known game to feature parallax scrolling. That is, objects in the foreground moved past more quickly than those in the background, giving the impression of depth and distance. Before true 3D, parallax was a popular fake-out. 1982, Saxon for arcade by Sega. Sega's cool but difficult shooter used real flight-style controls to make its dogfighting action feel double awesome. Saxon didn't just play great, it looked amazing too, thanks to its slick graphics. Using 3/4, aka isometric, perspective, Saxon was able to simulate combat with 3 axes of motion, quite literally adding a new depth to gaming. 1983, Journey for arcade by Bally Midway. A game based on the band Journey. Yes, it was awesome. Awesomely terrible. Not only did Journey revolutionize gaming by playing a tape cassette that warbled a short loop of the band's caterwauling, it also introduced digitization with in-game images of the members. Funny fact, the high score table was originally slated to include photos of top players, but that was brought to a screeching halt when one particularly crass fan flashed his little Steve Perry at the camera. 1983, Dragon Slayer for arcade by Cinematronics. Lots of games claim to be interactive cartoons, but Dragon Slayer actually was. Consisting almost entirely of theatrical quality animation by Disney expatriate Don Bluth, Dragon Slayer was more cartoon than game, but its use of full-motion video to depict gameplay was so dazzling that we didn't care. Our wallets weren't quite as dazzled. The trial and error mechanics made us a bunch of poor putzes. 1989, Prince of Persia for Apple II by Broderbund. An adventure as difficult as it is gorgeous, Prince of Persia gives players an hour to escape from prison and save a princess. Prince of Persia didn't invent rotoscoping, the art of creating ultra-realistic animation by tracing live footage, but no game has ever put it to better effect, mixing lifelike motion with precise controls and deviously challenging platforming and combat. And if you missed out on the original, publisher Ubisoft recently released a spiffed-up version on Xbox Live Arcade. 1991, FZero for Super NES by Nintendo. FZero used the Super NES's unique technology to give console gamers an experience even more visceral than could be found in the arcades. The Super NES featured a tech trick called Mode 7, a unique hardware feature that allowed it to stretch, skew, and rotate a single bitmap graphic to fake a 3D environment, put to use here to create the fastest, most convincing racetracks that had ever been seen on a home console. 1994, Donkey Kong Country for Super NES by Nintendo. Developer Rare's platformer didn't just remind gamers about Nintendo's original mascot. It was also a technical marvel that gave the Super NES a fighting chance against the Sega Saturn and PlayStation 1. Donkey Kong Country featured ACM, Advanced Computer Modeling, techbabble for 3D graphics turned into 2D sprites to offer far more detailed and realistic graphics than had ever been seen on a 16-bit system. Admittedly, they were a bit lifeless and plastic too, but that was a fair compromise for the spiffy visuals. 1997, Castlevania Symphony of the Night for PlayStation by Konami. Konami's PS1 masterpiece revitalized its flagship series and proved that 2D visuals still had some life in them yet, even in the age of 3D. Although Symphony of the Night didn't do anything technically new, its visuals consisted of a sophisticated mix of sprites and polygons that looked strictly old school but performed tricks that would have been impossible on a lesser system. It's just a shame no other PS1 game managed to pull off the same level of detail as Symphony of the Night. 1997, Street Fighter III for arcade by Capcom. The true sequel to Street Fighter II was a long time in coming, and it didn't catch on until a few years later when gamers finally began to appreciate its finer qualities. And there's no quality finer than Street Fighter III's movement, which is easily the pinnacle of traditional hand-drawn 2D sprite animation. Sure, Guilty Gear has a higher resolution, but Street Fighter III moves like nothing else. 1998, Klonoa, Door to Phantomile, for PlayStation by Namco. No, developer Namco did not invent the 2.5D game, the art of mixing 3D backgrounds with a traditional 2D platforming, but it sure did perfect it with Klonoa, Door to Phantomile. Using polygons instead of old-fashioned flat backgrounds allowed the developers to create some fancy and fresh visuals. Not just for show, the polygons allowed players to interact with objects in the background and switch to alternate paths through the stages. A cool new twist on a classic genre. 2007, Odin Sphere for PlayStation 2 by Atlas. A sleek hybrid of role-playing game, brawler, and farming sim. Really, it's awesome. Odin Sphere may have the prettiest 2D visuals with huge characters made of individually jointed limbs and gorgeous animation to boot. Sure, it may look dated, but it stands out for its sheer quality and expert craft. But is there anywhere left for 2D graphics to go from here? Well, yeah. We hear Odin Sphere was originally designed in high definition. Commence drooling.